Then he rose, gathered his cane, and left with the card between two fingers, like a man holding a match above oil. That night, back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot opened a fresh file. The man with velvet eyes, a case not yet begun. A man not yet guilty. A murder not yet committed. But oh, how the curtain stirs. End of chapter 18. A new mystery rises, not from blood, but from theater, elegance, and the ghost of a woman with a green curtain behind her smile. Hercule Poirot. And the girl behind the green curtains, chapter 19. Curtain memory autumn deepened. London, damp and melancholic, sank into its early dusks and silver-fogged mornings. Fires crackled behind closed drawing-room doors, and brass lamps glowed on mantelpieces, like forgotten trophies at Whitehaven Mansions. Poirot was packing a suitcase, not for a case, not yet. For a retreat. He had been invited by Lady Emmeline Worthington to her estate in Sussex. A restful weekend, she'd written, with no murder, no mischief, and no ghosts. Poirot was not convinced of the last. Lady Emmeline, a celebrated widow of the theatre, had once directed Vivian Hartley in her earliest stage performances. He had not forgotten that. He never forgot anything that mattered. As he folded a pocket. Square precisely. Four corners tucked, never creased. Poirot paused. His fingers brushed a soft envelope, tucked in the suitcase lining. Not by accident. The handwriting was his. He had placed it there one evening after the Hartley case concluded and never reopened it. Now he did, for future reflection, when the mind is clear and the heart is quiet. Vivian Hartley's greatest performance was not on the stage. It was in the drawing-room, the corridor, the garden, the graveyard of motive and manipulation. She did not act. She became. That is what makes her dangerous and unforgettable. Poirot closed the letter and returned it to its place. Then he locked the suitcase. Later, as his taxi wound through the city's evening streets, Poirot passed the ruin of the Greystone Theatre, now nothing more than scaffolding in memories. And yet, something shimmered faintly behind the fencing. A torn scrap of green velvet. He almost stopped the driver, but did not. That night, at Lady Emmeline's estate, Poirot was shown to a quiet room overlooking the garden. The window was framed by long, luxurious curtains. Green ones. Poirot, standing before them, smiled. Not with amusement, but with recognition. He drew them gently shut. Encore? He whispered. Perhaps not, but the memory remains. And the theater never forgets. Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 20. The final act. The fire burned low in the sitting room of Whitehaven Mansions, casting a soft amber glow across the spines of leather-bound volumes and the impeccable rows of pressed suits. Poirot sat very still in his armchair, a letter in his hand, unopened. Outside, the city murmured, the distant cry of a milkman's cart, the soft rattle of a fog-bound cab, the hush of London folding into itself. Poirot was not thinking of murder, nor guilt, nor even of Vivian Hartley. He was thinking of endings and illusions. The letter had arrived that morning. Unmarked. No handwriting he recognized, but the seal was unmistakable. A green wax stamp, pressed with a curtain partially drawn. Inside, card. Monsieur Poirot. There are some roles that must never be reprised. Some stories that end not with justice, but with silence. You chose silence. You chose well. She is gone, but she is not lost. And if you ever wish to know where the curtain truly fell, come to the Theatre du Silence, Marseille, backstage. Midnight. A friend of the final Poirot folded the letter slowly. There was no name. No threat, but his heart beat a little faster. Across from him, Hastings' photograph stood framed, smiling, untroubled, caught in some permanent summer of the mind. Poirot reached out and straightened it slightly. You would have said, "Don't go." Poirot, it's finished, and perhaps it is. But curtains are not walls. They do not block, they conceal. Poirot stood dot. He moved to the shelf and removed a slim black file. VH, the girl behind the green curtains. Below it, TVE, the man with velvet eyes. He placed both into a leather valise, locked it, then turned to his desk, where 3 cards now rested. The Queen of Spades, the King of Clubs. A third, just arrived in the envelope with the green seal. The Jack of Diamonds, stabbed in the chest with a drawn dagger. Encore. Poirot murmured dot, and then, almost sadly, curtain. That night, the gaslights of London flickered gently as Hercule Poirot boarded the overnight train to Dover en route to France, to Marseille, and toward a theater few remembered. But someone waited there dot, and someone knew that, the greatest detective in Europe, would not resist one final invitation to the stage, not while the house lights were still down. End of chapter 20. The curtain has fallen. The applause has ended. But somewhere, behind the velvet, a shadow waits. Hercule Poirot. No stamp dot, no return address dot, just a single word, inked in a narrow feminine hand. Encore dot inside. A folded card. A new playing card. This time, the King of Clubs. Poirot stared at it for a long time, the corners of his mouth tightening. He placed the card on his desk beside the Queen of Spades. A second act. Or a new player? He rang for Miss Lemon. "Cancel my appointments tomorrow, please." "Certainly, Monsieur Poirot." "Shall I ask why?" He smiled, a very small, very cold smile. "No, not yet." End of postscript dot, to be continued. Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 16. Shadows Among the Velvet Three. Days after the mysterious King of Clubs card appeared at his door, Poirot received a visitor dot. She arrived without a calling card, but with the kind of poise only money, fear, or guilt could buy. A slim woman in dove-gray gloves, her voice soft, each word sculpted like stone dipped in perfume dot. She did not sit. "I was told you might be discreet." Poirot gestured toward the velvet chair opposite. "Mademoiselle, Madame," she corrected. "For now." Poirot inclined his head. She sat. "I believe someone wishes to kill my husband," she said. "Many women believe that," Poirot replied. "Few are correct. Even fewer admit they may also wish the same." She didn't flinch. "My husband is dying," she said. "But he's not dying fast enough for his family. And he knows it." "And what is it you would have me do?" "Prove the murder before it happens." Poirot raised a brow. "Ah, a preventative detective. No," she said quietly. "A necessary one." Later that evening, Poirot placed the King of Clubs into a thin envelope and sealed it with wax. He addressed it not to a person, but a drawer in his desk. Beside it sat a folder, blank except for the penciled title, The Velvet Eyes Affair. Lilo. That in smaller letters. File opened. Pre-murder. Suspect unknown. Target will soon become clear. He closed the drawer dot and turned to the fireplace and spoke, as if to the shadows flickering there. Encore, indeed. Chapter 17. The mirror of Poirot the fog rolled low over the Thames, and Whitehaven Mansions stood quiet in the twilight, its warm gaslight windows glowing like old secrets dot in his sitting room. Hercule Poirot sat motionless before a tall cheval mirror, not to admire himself, not tonight. His gaze was fixed, serious, and strangely unsettled. He was studying the lines in his face, the graying at his temples, the reflection not of vanity, but of truth. The Hartley case was over, or so the world believed. Vivian had vanished. Lennox was dead. Cordelia broken. But Poirot could not forget that single word encore. It was not a threat. It was an invitation. Or worse, a nod of recognition. A clue sent not to reopen the past, but to challenge him to understand what came next. He touched the folded card on his desk, the king of clubs, and then his eyes fell on his own reflection again. What do you see, Poirot? Order, precision, truth. But what if truth serves no justice? What if it protects the guilty? What then? Hastings had once said, "You always win, Poirot. You always bring the villain to justice." He wondered now if that had ever truly been the case. Yes, he solved murders. Yes, he exposed liars, poisoners, BLSEKMAILERS. But what of the Vivian Hartleys? Those who slipped past the noose wearing veils of grief and courage? He had let her go, and he would do it again. But the knowledge did not comfort him. He stood and walked slowly to the window below. A woman in a green coat passed under a street lamp, her face hidden by an umbrella. Poirot watched her go. He whispered, "To be clever is one thing, mademoiselle. To be untouched by guilt, quite another." On his desk lay 2 open case files. The girl behind the green curtains, the velvet. Eyes affair, unopened, Poirot lit a single candle, as he always did before starting a new file. But before he began writing, he opened a drawer and took out a fard. Mirror no bigger than a coin. He placed it flat on the paper, so that the first reflection was not of the case, but of himself. End of chapter 17. A reflection is not always the truth. Sometimes it is what we choose to see, until the final act shatters the glass. Would you like to continue with Hercule Poirot and the girl behind the green curtains? Chapter 18. The Man with Velvet Eyes. Prologue to the next mystery. It began not with a murder, but a dinner invitation. The envelope arrived with no return address, no stamp, just a hand-delivered card on ivory paper, folded twice, and scented faintly of sandalwood. "Monsieur Poirot, you are cordially invited to dine at Les Jardins Noirs. Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Private table has been arranged. The host requests only one thing of you. Do not bring your little gray cells. Just your appetite." A friend from the curtain call Poirot held the card with one gloved hand, unmoving. It was an echo wrapped in silk, laced with irony, and perhaps poison. Les Jardins Noirs was not listed in any fashionable guide. But Poirot knew it. A private club masquerading as a restaurant, tucked behind a florist shop on Warwick Lane. Patronage by invitation only. Always by candlelight. He made the reservation. On the night in question, Poirot arrived precisely on time. A woman in a feathered hat took his coat. A waiter in a white silk jacket led him through velvet curtains, deeper and deeper into the heart of the restaurant, where the music softened and the light grew stranger. And then he saw him, the man seated at the corner table, back straight, fingers long and motionless. Dark suit, no tie. But what struck Poirot, what struck him immediately, was his eyes. Black, not in color, but in texture. Like cloth that swallowed light. Not cruel, not mad, but velvet. "Monsieur Poirot," the man said, rising, "we finally meet." Poirot took the offered hand, and felt nothing. No heat, no pressure. Like grasping air dressed in charm. "I do not believe we've been introduced," Poirot said calmly. "We haven't," the man replied, gesturing to the seat. "But I've known of you for quite some time." Poirot sat. "Indeed? That is not so unusual. But I do not know you. And that, monsieur, is rare." The man smiled, or at least mimicked one. "I represent something rather old," he said. "Older than murder, older than guilt. I represent the art of consequence." "Consequences come in courtrooms," Poirot said. Not always, the man replied. Sometimes they come in shadows, in silence. In the final act, when the audience has gone home, he poured wine. Neither drank. The waiter never returned dot at the end of the dinner. Untouched plates. No dessert. The man stood, leaving behind only a calling card, dot no name. No address, dot only an image, a black velvet curtain. Slightly parted, Poirot did not move for a long time. Yes, I thought it was you. Forgive me. I saw you perform once, years ago. The serpent's whisper. Vivian said nothing. You were unforgettable, he said. She looked at him carefully. That was another life. Still, the man said, smiling, may I join you? She paused, then nodded once. For a moment. He leaned on the rail beside her. Are you headed home? I don't have one, she said simply. No? He seemed genuinely surprised. Then you're very free. Vivian turned to the sea. You don't know what it costs to be free. He studied her. I'm sorry. That was a foolish thing to say. She gave him a smile, but it did not reach her eyes. No, it was honest, and most things people say to me aren't. They stood in silence for a time, watching the endless ribbon of water unfurl behind the ship. Do you miss the stage? He asked at last. Vivian hesitated. Then. Every day. Later that evening, Vivian returned to her cabin. The maid had turned down the bed and left a small silver envelope upon the pillow. No name. No seal. Inside was a single card. Ah, plain card. The Queen of Spades? She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. But there was nothing else. No note. No name. No message. Only the Queen. Watching her. Poised. Waiting. Vivian sat down slowly, the card, trembling in her hand. Then she placed it on the dresser, beside her silver brush, and whispered, the final cue. Far away, in a quiet flat overlooking the Thames, Hercule Poirot tucked a small box into a drawer marked, Hartley, V, private. Then he closed it. And locked it. Forever. ChatGPT said, Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains. Chapter 13. Epilogue. The final cue. London. 3 months later. Autumn rain fell softly across the rooftops of Whitehaven mansions. Beneath a gray sky and behind lace curtains, Hercule Poirot sat alone at his writing desk, polishing the silver handle of his cane. The radio murmured faintly. A string quartet full of quiet 8. Hastings had gone north on holiday. Scotland. Yard had long since closed the file. Vivian. Hartley's name no longer appeared in the gossip pages. Reginald Lennox had taken his own life in prison, an act of theatrical symmetry. Poirot found both predictable and distasteful. Cordelia Barrymore had received a suspended sentence for aiding and abetting, and was last seen boarding a train to Cornwall under her maiden name. Simon Vale's remains were laid to rest in a quiet grave in Kensal Green, under a borrowed name and an empty coffin beside him, perhaps a future home for truth. The curtain had fallen, and yet Poirot sat quietly, the tips of his fingers pressed together, listening not to the music, but to memory. The play has another act. The Queen of Spades, not a threat, not a signature, but a mark, a symbol of cleverness and cruelty. The woman, who had once played a frightened ingenue behind a green curtain, had now vanished, transformed. And somewhere in the world, a ship docked, and a woman stepped ashore with a new name, a new face, and a lifetime of freedom. Poirot did not envy her. He pitied her. Freedom was the loneliest country of all. He picked up a single sheet of notepaper and began to write, not for police, not for records. For himself. The case of Vivian Hartley will never be spoken of in court. No jury would convict her, not for the crime of manipulation, nor performance, nor the art of surviving men with power and ruin in their hands. But let it be said, she acted with intention. She bent guilt and innocence into something new. She built a stage, cast her actors, and exited with applause. Was she victim? Villain? Visionary? Only the curtain knows. And I, Hercule Poirot, bow to the brilliance of the final cue, though I do not approve of the play. He signed the page with a flourish, then folded it neatly and tucked it into the private file marked V.H. Green Curtain. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Somewhere far away, a theater stood in ruins. And somewhere else, on a quiet coastal road, a woman in dark glasses walked alone toward the next act. The stage was hers, but the spotlight would not follow. Not any more. And not ever again. Finn. A Hercule Poirot case by the hand of another. In the spirit of Agatha Christie. Option 1. Title page and vintage novel cover. Text format. A classic-style title and author page you can use as the opening for a PDF, ebook, or narration. Example, A Hercule Poirot Mystery, Hercule Poirot. And The Girl Behind the Green Curtains by S.A. Ali. In the spirit of Agatha Christie. The truth. It hides not in what one sees, but in what one chooses not to look at. Hercule Poirot published for audio adaptation, private release, and the lovers of classic crime. Option 2. YouTube audiobook intro script. Narrator ready. A perfect cold open for your audiobook version. Narrator intro. Spoken. In a calm British tone, this is Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, an original full-length mystery written in the classic style of Agatha Christie. In a quiet English village, a frightened heiress receives a mysterious letter. Within days, a figure is seen in the garden. A figure with no shadow. As danger draws closer, Hercule Poirot arrives to untangle the threads of deception. But behind every curtain lies a secret. And behind every smile, a mask. Chapters 1 through 13 follow. Read in the style of vintage detective fiction. Let the mystery begin. Option 3. Full text compilation file. PDF or doc. I can compile chapters 1 through 13 into one complete formatted document. Ideal for audiobook. Narration. Vintage style ebook or print. Google Docs or Word editing. Publishing a collector's edition Hercule. Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 15. Postscript, The Whispered Clue 6. Weeks after the epilogue closed on Vivian. Hartley's Tale. Poirot sat across from his longtime friend and confidant, Chief Inspector Japp, in a modest Soho cafe known more for its weak tea than its discretion. Japp stirred his cup, scowling at the floating lemon slice. You really think she planned it all? From the very beginning? Poirot leaned forward slightly, his eyes half-lidded. Planned? None. But adapted. Ah, oui. Like the improvisational genius of a stage actor without a script. She played every note as if she had written the symphony. Japp exhaled. It gives me the shivers. That woman fooled everyone. Poirot sipped his chocolate. Not everyone, mon ami. But most, yes. Because the world is trained to pity. Beautiful women who seem frightened. He tapped a finger against his cup. It is a disguise more perfect than any costume. Japp grunted. She's out there somewhere, and you let her go. Poirot looked out the window, watching people hurry past in the rain. She will not kill again. Of that I'm certain. Her stage is finished. But even as he said it, a flicker of doubt moved across his mind, like a curtain catching wind. That evening, Poirot returned home to Whitehaven Mansions to find an envelope waiting at his door. Poirot raised a hand. Please, no more acting. Not now. I have studied actors, mademoiselle, both on the stage and off. You, above all, understand the value of a part, and the danger of losing one's audience. Vivian's hand trembled. I don't know what you mean. "I think you wrote that letter," Poirot said softly. "Not to call yourself out into danger, but to create narrative, to invite me, to make the mystery real. You needed me here." She stared at him. Poirot continued. "You knew Lennox was stalking you, but you weren't afraid. Not truly. You saw a way to turn fear into drama, into victory." "No, you leaked the lighter," Poirot said. "You had it from Simon. He left it behind years ago. You knew it would stir the air. You let Cordelia believe she was helping you, then twisted her loyalty. You used Lennox. You allowed him to draw near, knowing he would try something. But you counted on me to catch him in time." A long silence. Vivian's voice, when it came, was calm. "I never wanted to die." "I believe you," Poirot said. She looked up at him now, her gaze level and composed. "I wanted control. For once. You feared your inheritance would come with obligations, with vultures. So you made yourself the mouse, to expose the cats." She said nothing. Poirot stood. "There will be no arrest," he said. "You committed no crime. You acted in fear, but also with calculation." Vivian's smile was faint. "I knew you'd find the truth eventually." Poirot bowed deeply. "And you knew I would not destroy you with it." As Hastings and Poirot rode away the next day, the countryside blurring past, Hastings finally spoke. "You knew, didn't you?" Poirot did not look at him. "Yes. Will you ever tell?" "No. There are crimes of the law, and there are crimes of the soul. She will live with hers. That is enough." He paused. "But I will remember. For the theater of justice, Hastings, must always have a witness." Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 11. The reflection, in the days that followed, life at Braithwaite Lodge resumed with a fragile air of normalcy. The house was quieter. Now Cordelia Barrymore had left in disgrace, taken away by the police under the weight of betrayal. Vivian stayed on, walking the gardens daily. Always alone. She had inherited everything. And no one dared to ask what price she had paid. Back in London, Poirot sat alone in his armchair at Whitehaven Mansions, a neat row of case files stacked on his mahogany table. But it was not the papers he was reading. It was a PLAYBILL. An old, yellowing theater program from the Greystone Theater. The title, The Serpent's Whisper, starring Vivian Hartley. Directed by Harold Minton. Produced by Reginald Lennox. Featuring Simon Vale. Poirot turned the card over. On the back, in faded pencil, was a note. "Always trust the quiet ones. They are the ones who watch." S.V. Poirot stared at it. The hand was Simon Vale's. He had it confirmed that same afternoon. Scotland Yard contacted him with a brief report. Body recovered from Greystone Theater ruins during excavation. Confirmed male. Initial dental match with Simon Vale. Blunt force trauma. Likely deceased 5 months. Cause of death, blunt force. No sign of fire damage. Estimated date of death, November 15th. 2 things stood out to Poirot. 1. Simon Vale had died the day after a sealed will revision by Vivian Hartley. 2. That date was also the last day he was seen leaving Braithwaite Lodge. The scene unfolded in Poirot's mind with chilling clarity. Simon Vale had not disappeared. He had returned to Braithwaite that night in November, perhaps to demand money, or to threaten Vivian, or, worst of all, to blackmail her with secrets from their past. And something had gone wrong, very wrong. Poirot recalled Vivian's words. "I still need to know. I still dream of the man with no shadow." No, not a dream, a memory. The night she struck Simon Vale, or watched someone else strike him, and stood in the moonlight, watching the shadowless figure fall. And then she built her stage, Poirot stood at his window, hands behind his back. She played her part to the end, he said softly. Hastings looked up from his armchair. You mean Vivian? Poirot nodded. She invited me to Braithwaite, not to protect her, but to absolve her, to ensure that I caught everyone else. That the curtain would fall on the right villains. But she didn't kill Vale, did she? Poirot's silence stretched. I cannot prove it, he said at last. There is no weapon, no witness, no confession, no evidence. Only the whispers in the wings, and the final bow. 3 days. Later, Vivian Hartley boarded a ship bound for Marseille. Poirot received a letter the morning after. Monsieur Poirot, I imagine by now you know everything. Or nearly everything. You always do. There are things a woman must do to survive, and some debts that cannot be paid in court. You were the best man I could have chosen, not to stop it, but to see it clearly. I go now not in fear, but in freedom. The green curtains are drawn back at last. Thank you for not asking me the final question. Yours, Vivian Hartley. Poirot folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. He looked out the window at the Thames and spoke aloud, to no one in particular. All wear masks, some to hide our guilt, others to protect our innocence. And with that, he poured himself a small, precise cup of hot chocolate, sat down, and opened the newspaper. The case was closed, but the play would echo for years. Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 12. A Mask at Sea. Renaissance glided across the blue-gray waters of the Channel, its white hull catching the late afternoon sun as it made steady progress toward Marseille. On the promenade deck, passengers strolled or sipped cocktails, their laughter rising over the hum of the ocean. Vivian Hartley stood alone at the rail, a silk scarf knotted at her neck, her dark glasses hiding eyes that had seen too much. She looked nothing like the woman who had once stood before the emerald curtains at Braithwaite Lodge, and perhaps she no longer was. Lower, the water churned steadily, cold and endless. She removed a letter from her coat pocket, folded, reread, and folded again. You were the best man I could have chosen, not to stop it, but to see it clearly. She tore it in half, and again, and again. The pieces fluttered down to the sea, like birds caught in a storm. Behind her, footsteps approached. Miss Hartley? She turned. A man stood before her, mid-30s, linen suit. Handsome, in the way confidence is handsome, not English. Something in the cheekbones, Northern European, perhaps Dutch. Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 1. The house at number 17, it began, as these things often do, on a gray morning in early October, when the fog hung low over the rooftops of Chelsea and the streets of London, seemed to echo with the footsteps of people walking without any particular destination. A fine drizzle misted the panes of number 17 Glengrove Crescent, catching light from the occasional passing motor car, like a veil of cobwebs spun across glass. Captain Arthur Hastings, recently returned from a brief business sojourn in Buenos Aires, was settling back into civilian rhythms at the modest flat he shared with his old friend Hercule Poirot. Poirot, the famous Belgian detective, sat at the breakfast table, his eggs arranged with geometric precision on his plate, his mustaches combed to perfection and gleaming like silver sickles. You are uneasy this morning, mon ami, Poirot observed, not looking up from his neatly trimmed toast. I'm not uneasy, Hastings replied, frowning at the fog outside. Just restless. This weather beastly stuff. It makes London feel like a city with secrets. May's not overwhelming, said Poirot with a smile. London is a city with secrets. That is why it is never dull. And yet you complain. I wouldn't complain if something interesting happened, Hastings muttered. Poirot turned his attention to the post, which his manservant Georges had just placed on the table, arranged by height and symmetry. Poirot picked up a pale gray envelope and examined it with raised eyebrows. "This," he said softly, "may be the something interesting." He opened the letter delicately with a silver knife, and as he read, the lines of his brow deepened into a small frown. "From a Miss Cordelia Barrymore," he said finally. "She writes from Chelsea House called Braithwaite Lodge. She is concerned for her employer, Miss Vivian Hartley, a young actress of some minor reputation in the West End. It seems Miss Hartley has taken to closing herself behind green velvet curtains in her bedroom at all hours of the day. She speaks to no one. She refuses meals. The household, Miss Barrymore, a cook, and a manservant have grown increasingly alarmed." Hastings blinked. "Sounds more like a case for a doctor than for a detective." Poirot's finger wagged. Gently, "Non, mon ami. There is something curious here. Listen, there have been strange noises at night. A man's voice, though none have visited. And yesterday, Miss Hartley was found in the garden at dawn, barefoot, staring at the hedge as though it would speak to her." He folded the letter. "That is not mere illness. That is melodrama, and I do not say that lightly." Hastings hesitated. "You think someone means her harm?" Poirot stood with a sigh and adjusted his immaculate cuffs. "I think I should like to see these green curtains for myself." They arrived at Braithwaite Lodge in the late afternoon. The house, tucked discreetly into a quiet crescent near Chain Walk, was of the Queen Anne-style red brick, gabled, with ivy growing in elegant coils along the windows. Though respectable, the house bore a certain air of faded glamour. One could well imagine a theater actress living here, perhaps dreaming of the stage, while glancing often at a mirror. Miss Cordelia Barrymore greeted them at the door. She was a woman of about 35, neatly dressed in a navy serge dress with a high collar, her fair hair scraped back into a bun that gave her face an expression of perpetual strain. She had the crisp, professional air of a woman who had once worked in better houses and now managed one slipping gently into disorder. "You must be Monsieur Poirot. I thanked you for coming," she said with quiet urgency, glancing over her shoulder, as though afraid someone might overhear. "You spoke in your letter of Miss Hartley's odd behavior," Poirot said as they were ushered into the drawing-room. "May I see her?" Miss Barrymore hesitated. "Miss Hartley is well. She is not quite herself. I will inform her of your arrival, but I cannot promise she will agree to see you." As she left, Hastings turned to Poirot. "It is peculiar." Poirot's eyes were roving the room. "It is more than peculiar. It is theatrical. Observe, the room is carefully kept, and yet there is dust on the mantelpiece only beneath the photograph of a man. That tells me it has been moved recently." The photograph showed a young man with strong features and a sardonic mouth. He wore a dark suit and had the look of someone who believed the world was amusing only when it hurt. "You think she moved the photograph?" Hastings asked. Poirot said nothing. His gaze moved to the fireplace, where an old theater program had been tucked behind a clock. They were interrupted by the return of Miss Barrymore. "She will see you," she said, her face unreadable. "But I warn you, do not expect coherence." Miss Vivian Hartley lay curled like a porcelain figurine on a chaise lounge in her upstairs chamber, a room heavy with velvet and perfume. The green curtains hung thickly behind her, casting the room in a funereal glow. She turned her head slowly as they entered, and Poirot saw at once that she was very beautiful and very afraid. "You are the detective," she said softly, though reciting a line. "The little man who sees everything?" Poirot inclined his head. "And you, mademoiselle, are a woman who sees something no one else does. Tell me, what is it that hides behind these curtains?" She laughed, but there was no mirth in it. "Death," she said, "and a man with no shadow." Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains chapter 2. The Man with No Shadow. Vivian Hartley's words. Death. And a man with no shadow hung in the still air of the green-curtained room like a note from some spectral orchestra, trembling and unresolved. Poirot, unmoved on the surface, adjusted the crease of his trousers before sitting on the narrow chair beside her chaise lounge. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "your words are ... striking. But let us now speak with clarity. You are afraid. Of what, precisely?" The young woman's fingers, pale and tremulous, clutched at the edge of the chaise as if to anchor herself. "I'm not mad," she whispered. "I know what you must think. They all do, Cordelia. Dr. Trenton, even Simon before he vanished. But I know what I saw." Poirot gave a slight nod. "Then tell me, if you please." Vivian's eyes darted to the green curtains behind her. They hung floor to ceiling, swallowing the light. "It began 3 weeks ago," she said slowly. "A dream at first. I was in the garden only. It wasn't the garden, exactly. It was as though the garden had been drained of color. And there he stood at the edge of the hedge. A man tall, in a gray overcoat and a hat pulled low, but no shadow. Not even under the moonlight. I know it sounds mad." "And this dream occurred more than once?" "Every night," she replied. "And then last Thursday I saw him while I was awake, at the French doors, just standing there." Hastings shifted in his seat. "Did he attempt to come inside?" "No," Vivian said, her voice now a strained whisper. "But the next morning I found one of my gloves on the doorstep. A green evening glove. I hadn't worn it in weeks." Poirot leaned back slightly, fingertips pressed together. "And have you spoken of this to anyone?" She gave a bitter smile. "Only Cordelia. She says I've been under strain, that the theater work, the solitude, the war has unmoored me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And what of this Simon you mentioned? Who is he?" Vivian's face hardened. "Simon Vale, an actor, once my fiancé." "Once?" She looked away. "He disappeared 10 days ago. We had quarreled. A terrible scene. He stormed out. I haven't heard from him since." Poirot stood and walked slowly to the window, gently parting the green curtains. The garden below lay washed in mist and shadow, the hedge running like a dark ribbon along its edge. Nothing moved. "You believe someone has been there?" he asked without turning. "I know it," Vivian said. "He watches. I feel it even now." Poirot dropped the curtain. "Very well, mademoiselle. I believe you." She blinked, startled. "You do?" "I do not say I believe all you say is exactly as it seems. But you have seen something. You have felt something. And the human brain, it is most clever at dressing fear in robes of illusion." He bowed. "I shall investigate. But you must trust me." Outside in the corridor, Miss Barrymore was waiting. Her arms were folded, and her lips pursed. "She's worse since Simon left," she said, as Poirot and Hastings followed her downstairs. They argued terribly. Money. A rumor about another woman, though I don't listen to theater gossip, Mr. Poirot. Poirot paused mid-step. "And this Simon Vale, where might he be found?" "No one knows," Barrymore replied crisply. "His agent says he missed 2 rehearsals for Macbeth. Simply didn't show. Very unlike him. They say he left for Devon, but no one's confirmed it. Does he have family?" "Not that I know of." "He stayed here frequently, though not with my approval, I must say. But 10 days ago he left and never returned." They had reached the drawing-room again. Poirot paced slowly. "Tell me, Mademoiselle Barrymore," he said, "have you heard the name Michael Blundell?" She looked surprised. "Why, yes, he's Miss Hartley's solicitor." Poirot nodded. "And he visits?" "From time to time." He was here not 4 days ago, in fact. Took tea with her and brought legal papers. Some business to do with her father's estate, I believe." Poirot's mustaches twitched. "And what about servants?" "There is only Mrs. Lamprey, the cook, and Henry, the manservant. Neither of them bright, but loyal enough." Poirot nodded. "I should like to speak with them." Mrs. Lamprey, stout and red-cheeked, seemed far more concerned with the quality of her biscuits than with any threat of murder or madness in the household. "She's delicate, poor dear," she told Poirot in the kitchen. "Miss Hartley's always been a nervous one. All that acting. And Mr. Simon, well, he had a temper, didn't he? You ask me, he's just run off." "And the glove left on the doorstep?" Poirot asked. Mrs. Lamprey pursed her lips. "Odd, that. Miss Hartley came down white as a sheet that morning. But we never found the second one. I assumed it got lost ages ago." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Henry the manservant was a silent, morose young man who blinked often and spoke in monosyllables. He had seen no visitors, no men by the hedge, no suspicious shadows. "I lock up at night, sir," he said dully. "Always check twice." Poirot, on his way out, paused in the hall. A gilt mirror hung near the coat stand, and a faint outlined fingerprints, perhaps marked its edge, as though someone had touched it in haste. Poirot looked at Hastings. A man disappears. A young woman lives in fear behind curtains of green. A solicitor brings papers from a dead father's estate. And someone leaves a single glove on the doorstep. No, mon ami. Something is most certainly not right. As they walked back into the London fog, Hastings lit his pipe thoughtfully. "What do you make of her story, Poirot?" Poirot did not immediately answer. He adjusted the angle of his hat and smiled faintly. "I make of it a puzzle, Hastings. One wrapped not in logic, but in performance. It is not only the girl behind the green curtains who is playing a role. Others are acting too." He paused on the corner of the Crescent and looked back once at the house of Braithwaite Lodge, the green curtains just visible through the misted glass. "Someone," he said quietly, "is writing a script. And murder, I suspect, will be the final scene. Hercule Poirot and the girl behind the green curtains, Chapter 3. The disappearing actor the following morning dawned clearer, though London still wore its customary coat of soot and sighs. Poirot, ever precise, dressed with care in a dove-gray suit and a black cravat, his mustaches trimmed to their sharpest points. Hastings, still shaken by the strange atmosphere of Braithwaite Lodge, joined him for a brisk breakfast. "There's something terribly unnatural about the house," Hastings said, stirring his tea. "It's not just Vivian Hartley. It's the air of the place. As though something's waiting." Poirot tapped his spoon once against his saucer. "Yes, mon ami, the tension is thick, like the silence before a note is struck on the piano. But I begin to see the shape of the melody." They were interrupted by the arrival of Georges Poirot's efficient manservant, carrying a slim envelope on a tray. "For you, monsieur. Delivered by hand not 5 minutes ago." Poirot took the envelope and opened it carefully. The note inside was brief, written in a slanted, hurried hand. "Monsieur Poirot, you seek Simon Vale? He will not be found in Devon or elsewhere. He is gone, and some silences must be respected. Let the girl alone." A friend Poirot read it twice, then passed it to Hastings, who whistled low. "Gone? You don't think he's been murdered?" "That is one possibility. But consider, Hastings gone is not the same as dead. Sometimes disappearance is more convenient than death, particularly for a man with secrets." Hastings frowned. "Do you think Miss Hartley wrote this?" Poirot raised his eyebrows. "No. She is frightened. But not secretive. This is from someone else, someone with something to protect. And that," he added, rising to his feet, "is always of interest to Hercule Poirot. Their first visit of the day was to the Lyceum Theatre, where Simon Vale had last performed in a supporting role in a well-reviewed production of the Revenger's Tragedy. The theatre manager, a harried man named Felix Mordaunt, met them in his cluttered office backstage. "Simon?" Mordaunt said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Haven't seen him in over a week. Missed 2 rehearsals. Didn't send. Word. Thought he'd had one of his moods and legged it to Brighton." "Moods?" Poirot inquired, folding his hands. Mordaunt shrugged. "He was a brilliant performer, mind you, but temperamental. Vain as a peacock, jealous as a schoolboy. He hated Vivian's success more than he ever admitted. She was being courted by producers, and he wasn't." Poirot nodded. "And do you know of any personal disagreements between them?" Mordaunt gave a knowing smile. "You're asking if he was faithful?" "Lord, no. Simon loved the chase. Flirted with anything in a skirt. But I heard he'd been seeing someone quite seriously. A wealthy patroness. Older. Her name escapes me." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Try to remember. It may be most useful." Mordaunt tapped the table, eyes narrowed in thought. "Blundell. That's it. Not the lady's name, but the family. She's Michael Blundell's sister or cousin, something like that. Name of Sybil. Sybil Blundell. Lives out in Richmond." Poirot gave a sharp nod. "Merci, Monsieur Mordaunt. You have been most helpful." They drove to Richmond that afternoon, Hastings steering Poirot's beloved Lagonda along the Thames roads while the detective sat in composed silence, fingertips steepled. The house they sought, Blundell House, was an elegant Georgian villa surrounded by hawthorn hedges and nestled among trees that had once seen nobler centuries. Miss Sybil Blundell received them in a silk kimono and slippers, with a cigarette, holder clutched between pale fingers. She was in her early 50s, with a faded theatrical beauty and a voice like rustling paper. "Simon Vale?" she said, eyes flicking over Poirot with idle curiosity. "He's gone, hasn't he?" "You expected it?" Poirot asked, studying her. "I was waiting for it," she said with a soft smile. "He was too clever for his own good, and too handsome to survive long without causing damage. He used people, myself included, though I played the game, I assure." "You?" Poirot inclined his head. "Do you believe he is alive?" She considered. "I think he is hiding, possibly abroad. Simon always had dreams of Paris or Tangier, places where he could vanish into a crowd of fools who'd never heard of him." "And Miss Hartley?" Miss Blundell's smile faded. "Vivian? Poor creature. She never understood what he was. He ruined her. Then, having done so, he fled. I warned her. But she thought herself in love." Poirot leaned forward. "Forgive the intrusion, mademoiselle. But were you aware of any legal entanglements? Did Mr. Vale owe money?" Blundell gave a throaty laugh. "Oh? He bled money. Cards, drinks, women, even borrowed from me. But he never intended to repay. I knew it." Poirot stood. "You have been candid. I thank you." As they exited, Hastings muttered, "What a serpent!" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Indeed, but a serpent is only dangerous when cornered. I believe Miss Blundell is at peace with her venom." That evening, as they returned to their flat, Georges met them at the door with an expression of quiet alarm. "A gentleman has called, monsieur. He insisted upon seeing you, and waited nearly 2 hours. Left only 10 minutes ago." "Did he give his name?" "Yes, monsieur. Mr. Michael Blundell." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And he left no message?" "Only this." Georges handed him a folded piece of card. It was a theater ticket stalls, seat G7 for that evening's performance of Macbeth. On the back, scrawled in pencil, were the words, "Come alone, G7 will be empty." You must see what I see. At 7:30. Poirot was seated in the dim, murmuring hush of the theater Hastings left behind. The play unfolded with intensity and shadow, but Poirot scarcely glanced at the stage. His attention was fixed on the stalls below, the audience, and the ornate private boxes. At the first intermission, a shadow flitted past the curtain in the box opposite his row. Poirot turned sharply. The curtain stirred. And then vanished. Hercule Poirot and the girl behind the green curtains. Chapter 4. The shadow in the box. The curtain rustled. Poirot's eyes, keen and precise, fixed on the opposite box like a hawk observing prey. But the flicker of movement had passed, and now there was only stillness, just the theater's flickering lights and the soft murmur of the intermission crowd. He stood, straightened his cuffs, and moved with deliberate calm toward the box. The usher at the stairway gave him a curious glance, but Poirot's name opened many doors, even unannounced. "May I assist you, sir?" the usher asked uncertainly. "No need, monsieur," Poirot said gently. "I have a small matter to settle with someone in box C." He approached the curtain and without a pause swept it aside. The box was empty. No coats, no drinks, no programs. Only a faint impression on the velvet seat, as though someone had been sitting there moments ago. Poirot stepped inside, his shoes. Silent on the carpet. He examined the seat, then the sill of the open window looking out toward the stage. A faint smudge of fingerprint glistened in the light. Someone had stood here, perhaps watching him, as he watched them. And then he noticed something else. Tucked between the seat cushions was a folded envelope. It bore no address. Inside was a single card. "You are clever, Poirot, but not clever enough to stop what's coming." Poirot turned the card over. On the back was drawn, in blue ink, a crude sketch of Braithwaite Lodge. A heavy green line had been scrawled across the top window, the bedroom with the green curtains. Poirot's brows drew together. A warning or a taunt? When he returned to the flat, Hastings was pacing the drawing room like a restless hound. "You were gone nearly 3 hours. What happened?" Poirot handed him the card and said nothing. Hastings read it and frowned. "A threat?" "A message," Poirot said slowly, "from someone who believes he has the upper hand. But what does it mean? Why Braithwaite Lodge again? Is Vivian in danger?" Poirot adjusted a paperweight on the desk with precise fingers. "Yes, Hastings, I believe she is." He turned away, eyes narrowing. "We must return there at once, but not openly. The time has come to observe without being seen." They arrived at Braithwaite Lodge just before midnight, under the cover of fog and silence. Poirot had arranged it in advance. Cordelia Barrymore had agreed, reluctantly, to let them in privately while the household slept. She met them at the servants' entrance, clad in a shawl and clutching a lantern. "She's sleeping." "Finally," Barrymore whispered, her face pale. "But I don't like it, Mr. Poirot. There's been something in the house tonight. The air feels different." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You believe in such impressions?" "I've worked in many homes, sir. When something is wrong, truly wrong, you feel it, as though the house knows." She led them up the rear staircase, past silent paintings and dim hallways, until they reached Vivian's room. The green curtains were drawn tight. The door was ajar. Poirot moved with quiet steps. Inside, Vivian lay in bed, her face pale against the pillow, the green curtain casting the room in a spectral glow. Her lips twitched in sleep. On the bedside table sat a glass of water and a folded theater program. Poirot moved to the window. Carefully, he parted the curtain an inch and froze. There, at the edge of the garden hedge, stood a figure. Motionless. Dark. Coat, hat pulled low. Hastings behind him, sucked in his breath. "Is that?" Poirot did not answer. He turned sharply to Cordelia. "Stay with her Do not let her wake." Poirot and Hastings crept down the back stair and through the garden, door into the fog-drenched night. The garden was vast, hemmed by the looming hedge. The man was no longer visible. Poirot pressed forward, scanning the mist. A faint sound scraping echoed ahead. They turned a corner of the hedge and stopped. A hole had been cut in the dense hedge wall. Through it, faint footprints led away. Into the open field beyond. "Someone's watching the house," Hastings whispered. "But why?" Poirot crouched beside the prince, then straightened with narrowed eyes. "They were here," he murmured. "But not to harm. Not yet. They watch. They wait." They returned to the house, Poirot deep in thought. At the front door, he turned to Hastings. "We are dealing, mon ami, with an illusionist. Someone who understands performance, fear, misdirection. But more importantly, someone who understands Vivian. Then the question is, what are they waiting for?" Poirot looked up to the lit window with the green curtains. "They are waiting," he said softly, "for her to break." The next morning, Poirot requested an urgent appointment with Michael Blundell, the family solicitor. He received them in a tidy office in Lincoln's Inn, with dark paneling and polished shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. "Monsieur Poirot," Blundell said coolly, "I assume you've come about Miss Hartley. You know she's being watched." Blundell's expression did not change. "She is a public figure, of sorts. Fame invites intrusion." Poirot dropped the envelope with the card onto the desk. Blundell examined it, then set it down. "Amateur. Theatrics. None," Poirot said. "This is no amateur." Blundell folded his hands. "Then you believe Miss Hartley is in danger?" "I believe someone is attempting to unseat her sanity, to isolate her. And very soon, I believe, they will kill her or make it appear she has taken her own life." Hastings flinched. "Suicide?" Poirot turned his gaze on Blundell. "A convenient ending for a girl with no living family, no protector, and a large inheritance coming due next week when she turns 25. An inheritance administered by your firm, I believe?" Blundell's face paled slightly. Yes. Her father left the estate in trust. She gains full control in 5 days." Poirot stood. "I shall not permit that date to arrive unguarded." As they left, Hastings said quietly, "You don't trust Blundell?" Poirot's eyes glittered. "I trust no one. Not yet, but I am watching. And when the curtain falls then, Hastings, we shall see who takes the final bow." Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 5. The curtain moves 5 days. That was all that remained until Vivian Hartley would legally inherit the Hartley estate. A tidy sum, the majority of which had been tied up in her late father's investments and managed by Michael Blundell's law firm. 5 days until she would become, at the age of 25, both independently wealthy and, perhaps to someone expendable. Poirot, never one to waste time, took up residence in a small guest chamber at Braithwaite Lodge under the pretext of investigative necessity. Hastings, rather less comfortably, was installed in a stiffly furnished room on the 3rd floor with poor heating and an aggressively floral wallpaper that left him unsettled. Miss Barrymore seemed not only to accept Poirot's presence, but, to Hastings' surprise, appeared rather relieved by it. "There is something awful in the atmosphere of this house," she told him over breakfast. "You must feel it too, Captain Hastings. Last night I heard footsteps on the landing outside. My room, heavy ones, at least twice." "No one admitted to it?" Hastings asked. "Everyone denies it. But someone walked that corridor." "I'm certain of it." Poirot appeared a moment later, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, his mustaches gleaming and his expression unreadable. "You heard footsteps last night, mademoiselle?" he asked gently. Miss Barrymore turned to him, almost eagerly. "Yes, outside my door. slow and deliberate. "You did not open the door to look?" "Of course not," she said stiffly. "A woman must have a sense of self-preservation, Monsieur Poirot." "Turs bien. And Mademoiselle Hartley? How? Did she sleep?" Miss Barrymore hesitated. "Badly," she cried out once. "I found her this morning sitting on the edge of the bed, trembling. She said she dreamed of the man with no shadow again." Poirot nodded. "The pressure is increasing, but it is not natural. It is orchestrated." He turned suddenly to Hastings. "Come, mon ami. We must speak with Henry." They found the manservant. Henry in the garage, oiling the hinges of the side gate. His face, never expressive to begin with, seemed paler than usual. "You were on night duty again, yes?" Poirot asked. Henry nodded. "I lock up at 11. Then I checked the garden doors again at midnight." "Did you see anything last night? Hear anything?" Henry hesitated. "Just something odd. When I checked the garden door at midnight, it was locked. But I know I'd left the iron bar down earlier. At midnight, it was unlatched." Hastings looked at Poirot. "So someone had been out in the garden? Or returned from it?" Poirot murmured. "But if they re-entered, how?" Henry looked uncomfortable. "It could have been Miss Hartley." He muttered. "She sometimes goes to the garden late, when she can't sleep." Poirot said nothing. He bent to examine the doorway. A faint mark mud, perhaps, was just visible on the inside threshold. "But there is only one pair of her shoes with fresh mud on them," Poirot said, after checking in the cloak cupboard. "And she is not the only one whose boots would fit. That mark." He turned to Henry. "Let us not play games, mon ami. If you know something, say it now." Henry's eyes darted between them. I saw someone standing in the garden," he blurted at last. "About 1 o'clock, just at the edge of the hedge, watching the house. Did you see who it was?" "No, sir. It was too dark." "But they were tall, not Miss Hartley." "And you did not raise the alarm?" Henry looked shamefaced. I thought maybe it was her again. I didn't want to get her in trouble." Poirot studied the young man carefully. "You're fond of her, aren't you?" Henry said nothing. Later, that afternoon, a letter arrived. It was addressed in a bold, looping hand to Vivian Hartley, but Poirot, upon examining the envelope, requested it be opened in his presence. The letter read, "My darling Vivian, I know you think me lost, but I am not. I had to leave. There was danger, and I could not explain. I beg you to meet me, once and only once, at our old place at the Greystone Theatre ruins, just outside of Marlow. Come at dusk on Friday. Come alone. Yours always." S. Hastings let out a low whistle. "That can't be real, Simon Vale." "Asking her to meet him? It's a trap." "Possibly," Poirot said. "Or possibly it is real. But whether penned by Simon or not, someone wants her alone on Friday evening, the same day she inherits her fortune." Vivian, when shown the letter, clutched it in shaking hands. "It's his writing," she said, her voice almost inaudible. I know it. I remember it from love notes, theater scripts. It has to be him." Poirot looked at her closely. "And you still love him, despite everything?" She hesitated. "No," she said at last. "But I need to know." Poirot turned to Miss Barrymore. "Under no circumstances is she to go unaccompanied. We will prepare for Friday." That evening, Poirot sat alone in the drawing-room, eyes half-lidded in thought. The curtains were drawn, the fire low. He rose and went to the window that overlooked the garden. Then, without warning, he stepped sharply backward. There was a figure, not at the hedge dot, but inside the garden. Closer now, standing just beyond the rose-arched hat, coat, motionless. Poirot did not move. He waited. The figure turned, vanished behind the arbor. Poirot spun on his heel and called down the hall, "Hastings!" Within moments, they were in the garden. Again, lanterns raised, but the figure was gone. Only one thing remained. Beneath the rose bush, lying in the mud, was a small silver lighter. Engraved on it were the initials, SVHERCULE, Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green. Curtains, Chapter 6. The lighter in the garden. The silver lighter glinted in Poirot's palm like a whisper from the past. It was slim, monogrammed with the initials SV, and adorned with a delicate design of ivy leaves, elegant, expensive, and unmistakably personal. Simon Vales, Hastings said, staring down at it. That seals it. He has been here. Poirot did not reply immediately. He turned the lighter over once, then again, his expression unreadable. Possibly, he murmured at last, but not necessarily recently. Hastings frowned. You mean it could have been planted? Exactament. There are too many performances in this little drama. The lighter appears after the letter. The letter arrives after the vision in the garden. Each development, you see, is convenient. He slipped the lighter into his inner pocket. Come, let us not linger like detectives in a penny novel. The garden tells us little more tonight. The following morning, Poirot began his inquiries with greater intensity. He first returned to the solicitor's office at Lincoln's Inn, where Michael Blundell greeted him with a cold expression and a reluctant handshake. I suppose you're here about Miss Hartley's trust, he said tersely. I am here, Poirot replied, about a letter, supposedly from Simon Vale, inviting her to the Greystone Theatre ruins on Friday. It was delivered anonymously. Blundell's brows drew together. Greystone Theatre? I know it. An old ruin. Half collapsed since the fire 5 years ago. Dangerous. Place. Why would he choose there? That is precisely what I am asking, Monsieur Blundell. Why, indeed? Blundell folded his arms. If Simon sent that letter, I doubt it was with innocent intentions. Poirot studied him. You believe he would harm her? I believe he was a man of talent and charm, and absolutely no moral compass. Poirot allowed the moment to settle, then produced the lighter. Blundell's gaze dropped to it. His expression darkened. Well, that settles it, doesn't it? None, Poirot said firmly. It complicates it, because this lighter was found too conveniently. A token left in plain view. Theatrical, staged. Blundell's eyes narrowed. Are you accusing me, Monsieur Poirot? I accuse no one. Poirot replied with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I observe. I ask questions, and sometimes I receive answers. Later that afternoon, Poirot and Hastings paid a discreet visit to the archives of the London Gazette, hoping to unearth more about the Greystone Theatre fire. The building had been a modest but storied venue, popular among fringe performers and lesser-known companies. The article from 5 years earlier was buried in a dull column of small print tragedy. Fire at Greystone Theatre claims one life. Fire broke out late Tuesday evening after a private rehearsal. Theatre employee Harold Minton, 52, perished in the blaze. Authorities suspect an electrical fault. The building has since been condemned. No arrests were made. Poirot's eyes lingered on the final sentence. No arrests, he repeated. But someone profited from that fire, I think. He turned to Hastings. Let us make a list, mon ami. We must revisit the cast of this little play. Not only those present now, but those who were present then. By mid-evening, Poirot had returned to Braithwaite Lodge, notebook in hand. Vivian Hartley sat in the drawing-room, firelight casting shadows on her face. You were performing at the Greystone before it burned, n'est-ce pas? Poirot asked casually. She nodded, blinking. It was one of my first roles. A dreary little melodrama called The Serpent's Whisper. We closed 2 weeks before the fire. Do you remember the crew? The owner? Owner? I believe his name was Lennox, Reginald Lennox, and the director was Harold Minton. Poirot looked up sharply. The man who died? Yes. Poor man. Burned alive, they said. It was dreadful. I didn't know him well, but he seemed kind. Poirot tapped his notebook. And did Simon Vale perform there with you? Vivian hesitated. Yes, though he came in late for another production. I think he only stayed a few weeks. And Reginald Lennox, where is he now? I haven't the faintest idea, she said. The fire ruined him. The insurance company refused to pay out. Said it was negligence. He vanished after that. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A man ruined by fire, another dead. And now someone lures you back to the ruins. Curious, non? Vivian looked down at her hands. Do you think someone wants to kill me? Poirot knelt before her gently. I think someone wants you gone, but that is not the same as being dead. That night, Poirot and Hastings sat in Poirot's small guest room. The detective had laid out several pages of notes, names, and arrows drawn between them. Observe, Hastings, Poirot said. We have Vivian Hartley, heiress, actress, and frightened. Simon Vale lover, actor, disappeared. Michael Blundell, solicitor, and gatekeeper of the inheritance. Cordelia Barrymore, devoted, perhaps too much so. Henry, the silent watcher. Miss Sybil Blundell, a woman with wounded pride. And Reginald Lennox, a ghost, ruined by fire. He tapped the page with a delicate finger, and through it all, threads of fear. A man with no shadow. A lighter. A forged letter. A theater. Earned and forgotten. And always the green curtains. Hastings leaned forward. You think this plot has been long in the making? Poirot gave a slow nod. Yes, it is not a crime of passion. It is a crime of patience. He stood abruptly and crossed to the Vole. Window. The garden below was still, but it is coming to a close, Hastings. The final scene is approaching. And someone intends to play it well. Hercule Poirot and the girl, behind the green curtains, Chapter 7, lies and letters it. Was the morning of Wednesday, 2 days before Vivian Hartley's appointment at the Greystone Theatre ruins. Outside Braithwaite Lodge, a light drizzle misted the windows, and the hedgerows trembled in the grey wind like restless sentinels. Poirot sat at the breakfast table, nibbling a brioche with fastidious care. Hastings, however, could scarcely keep. Still, you must admit it, Poirot, he said, pouring coffee with a trembling hand. It's all coming together. The man with no shadow. The forged letter. The lighter. All signs point to Simon Vale. He's trying to lure her out and do God knows what. Poirot reached for his spoon and stirred his tea precisely 3 times. You are convinced, mon ami? Well, yes, aren't you? Poirot gave a small sigh. There is a certain narrative appeal in such a conclusion. But you forget my cardinal rule. What is dramatically satisfying to the audience is often false in life. Hastings opened his mouth to protest, but at that moment, Cordelia Barrymore entered with a bundle of post. There's another letter, she said, frowning. It arrived by hand, no postmark. For Miss Hartley. Poirot took it gently. The handwriting was the same elegant loop as the first. He opened it carefully. Vivian, I beg you, do not speak to Poirot. He will only confuse matters. Come to Greystone on Friday. Alone, you must. Everything depends on ITSPOIROD's lips tightened. Interesting, he said softly. What's it say? Asked Hastings. Poirot handed it over. It is a clumsy attempt to drive a wedge between us. Whoever wrote this fears I am getting close. Cordelia hovered in the doorway, uneasy. She hasn't come down yet. Vivian, I checked her room. She's still asleep, I think. Hung rose. Let you not wake her. She will need her strength. But Vivian had not been sleeping. She sat at her vanity, the second letter open on her lap, her face pale and drawn. The green curtains cast their eternal shadow, wrapping the room in an emerald dusk. She did not hear Poirot enter at first. "Mademoiselle?" She looked up with a start. "Oh, I didn't hear you. You received another letter, I think." Vivian hesitated, then held it up. "He wants me to come alone. He says not to trust you." Poirot gave her a long look, then walked to the curtains and pulled them slightly aside. The garden lay still. The hedge stood like a theater backdrop, concealing all it might hide. "Do you believe him?" Poirot asked gently. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said quietly. "Sometimes I think I'm going mad. Other times I wonder if I've already gone." Poirot turned. "No, mademoiselle, you are not mad, but you are being manipulated, gaslighted, as the Americans say. Someone wants you to feel unmoored, to question your senses, to doubt your protectors." He stepped closer. "I ask only one thing. Do not go to Greystone alone. You must trust me, or this story will end badly." Vivian stared at the letter. "But if it is Simon—" "Then let us trap him," Poirot said calmly, "but not by walking blind into danger." That afternoon, Poirot and Hastings visited the London Metropolitan Police in private consultation. Chief Inspector Julian Mercer, a sharp-featured man, with thinning hair and a suspicious eye, met them in his office. "I'll admit, Poirot," he said, "this all seems rather thin. A frightened heiress, a vanished actor. And what? A ghost in a garden?" Poirot leaned forward. "Not a ghost, my friend. A man who wishes to seem like a ghost. That is quite different. And I believe a crime is being prepared." Mercer tapped his fingers on the desk. "You want officers at Greystone?" "No, not visible ones. I want a discreet team nearby, hidden, watching. You're certain something will happen?" Poirot gave him a grave look. "I would stake my name on it." Mercer sighed. "Very well. But if this turns into a case of cold feet and romantic theater, I'll be the laughingstock." Poirot rose. "Then we must make very sure that what occurs is no performance." That night, Poirot sat alone in the lounge, reviewing the list once. Again, names, arrows, motives. And then, in the quiet, he heard it, a faint thump from upstairs. Now he rose instantly and ascended the staircase, feet silent on the carpet. At the top landing, he paused. The door to Vivian's room was ajar. He knocked softly. No reply. He pushed it open. The room was empty, the bed untouched, the window open. The green curtain blew inward with the cold wind. On the vanity sat a single note, written hastily in pencil. "I must go. I have to see him. You don't understand. Please forgive me." Poirot's face turned cold. "She's gone," Hastings said behind him, breathless. "She slipped away." Poirot turned. "No, she was taken." He pointed to the rug. "A heel mark. A second pair of prints heavier. Male. And now," Poirot said quietly, "the curtain rises." Hercule Poirot and the girl behind the green curtains. Chapter 8. The trap closes. Fog lay heavy over the fields beyond Hampstead as Poirot and Hastings stood in the now empty bedroom of Vivian Hartley. The green curtain still flapped gently. In the breeze, a signal flag from a vanished passenger. Below, the garden remained as quiet as a held breath. Poirot crouched at the edge of the carpet, examining the faint impressions in the pile. "She wore heels when she left," he murmured. "But here, these other marks, broader, flatter. A man's, perhaps boots." "Then she didn't go willingly," said Hastings grimly. "No," Poirot agreed. "She wrote that note under pressure. The tone is rushed, uneven. See here, please forgive me. Not goodbye, not even I love him." She was trying to buy time. But for whom? He stood, expression tightening. The house must be searched immediately. They swept the grounds with Henry and Miss Barrymore's reluctant help. The side garden door had been unlocked. A faint trail of crushed leaves led through the hedge, and on to the open field beyond. Poirot paused at the break in the hedge, then turned to Henry. "You were on duty again tonight?" "I was, sir," the young man replied, eyes wide. "But I swear, I didn't see anyone. I never left the kitchen. Miss Barrymore wanted tea." Poirot tilted his head. "How long were you away from the back hall?" 15 minutes? "Not more. It was around 10:30. "Just long enough," Poirot said. "Someone knew your habits, Henry. They waited for the moment when you would be away, and then they struck." He turned to Hastings. "We must go." "She has not yet reached Greystone. If we are swift, we may still be in time." The Greystone Theatre ruins were half an hour's drive from Braithwaite Lodge, down crumbling lanes and shadowed woods that once held carriages and gas lamps, but now echoed only with the rustle of foxes and the distant low of cattle dot as the car approached. The theatre's shape loomed through the mist, a broken husk of a building, its stone facade leaning precariously, and its roof open to the moonless sky. Trees had grown through the orchestra pit, and what had once been the grand foyer was now cracked and weeping ivy. 3 police constables waited in the trees, hidden. Chief Inspector Mercer stepped forward as Poirot emerged from the Lagonda. "Place is empty so far," he said quietly. "No sign of your girl, or anyone else." "She will come," Poirot said, "or be brought. We wait." They took up position inside the ruin, Hastings and Mercer crouching behind the remnants of the old box seats, while Poirot stood calmly near the center of what was once the stage, now warped an uneven dot, and then footsteps. Hastings saw her first. A figure emerging from the misted trees. Vivian. She was walking slowly, arms wrapped about herself, eyes wide and distant. "She's alone," Hastings whispered. "No," Poirot said softly. "She only appears to be." Behind her, another figure emerged. Tall, dark coat, hat pulled low. Poirot stepped out from the shadows. "Good evening, Monsieur Vale." The man stopped. Vivian gasped. "Poirot." "Do not move," Poirot said gently. "You are quite safe." The man, Simon Vale, said nothing. Poirot turned to the constables. Now, in seconds, the figure was surrounded, disarmed, and revealed in the lantern light. It was not Simon Vale. Was Reginald Lennox. Vivian stared. Who is that?" "The former owner of this theater," Poirot said. "A man presumed vanished, ruined after the fire. But he did not disappear. He watched and waited." Lennox's face was tight with rage. "You don't understand." "No?" Poirot interrupted. "Let me show you that I do." They returned to Braithwaite Lodge before dawn. Vivian was taken upstairs to rest. Miss Barrymore wept openly, and Henry stood by the door, white as chalk. Poirot summoned the entire household into the drawing-room. It was time. He stood before them with hands clasped, Hastings at his side, and Mercer waiting just beyond the doorway. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "permit me to tell you the story, the true story, of what happened here. You see, it began long before the first letter, before the shadow in the garden. It began 5 years ago, with the fire at the Greystone Theatre. A man died. A career ended. A theater fell into ash and ruin. But what most do not know is this: the fire was no accident. A hush fell over the room. Reginald Lennox," Poirot continued, "set the fire himself, intending to claim the insurance. But the company refused payment. Why? Because they discovered a detail he did not expect. Someone died inside. A man named Harold Minton. Lennox fled, disappeared. But his life and his revenge were only beginning." Poirot turned to Vivian. Blamed you, mademoiselle. You, the starlet who left just before the fire. You who charmed the crowds. You who escaped while he lost everything. I had no idea, she whispered. I barely knew him. None. But obsession is not. Logical. He watched your rise, your inheritance approaching. And he decided he would take back what he believed he deserved. Poirot turned now to the others. First, he eliminated Simon Vale. The real Simon Vale is almost certainly dead, months ago, perhaps more. His disappearance was not escape. It was removal. Lennox used his name, his handwriting, to create doubt, fear, illusion. He watched this house, moved through its gardens, left letters and planted objects, all to drive Vivian to the edge. And on the eve of her inheritance, Hastings murmured, he lures her to the ruins. Poirot nodded. Where a second fire, or a fall, or a murder could occur. A convenient tragedy, the heiress dead, the money never inherited. And who then would step forward, I wonder, with forged documents or blackmail ready? He paused, but he made one mistake. He underestimated Hercule Poirot. Lennox was taken into custody. Vivian was safe. And 2 days later, on the morning of her 25th birthday, Poirot handed her a small gift, wrapped in linen and ribbon. She opened it slowly. Inside was the silver lighter. I thought you might want it, Poirot said, as a reminder. That memory may deceive, but the truth always waits in the light. She looked at him through tears. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. He bowed gently. Bon anniversaire, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 9. The second mask might have ended there. A man arrested, a life saved, and a fortune secured. But Poirot, ever fastidious, found no satisfaction in almost solving a case. His instincts whispered. Something still lingered beneath the surface. Reginald Lennox was in custody. He had confessed to forging the letters, impersonating Simon Vale, and plotting Vivian's death at the ruins. But his motive? Revenge, he said. Simple, clean, complete. Too clean. Too simple. Poirot remained uneasy. The morning after Lennox's arrest, Hastings found Poirot alone in the Braithwaite Lodge drawing room. He was standing by the tall window, his hands behind his back, gazing through the streaked glass at the garden where so much had played out. I say, Hastings began, I thought you'd be satisfied. You caught him. Vivian's safe. Poirot did not turn. That is the trouble, Hastings. The mind of Hercule Poirot is like the balance of a fine scale. One grain out of place, and it tips. What grain? Simon Vale, Poirot replied. Turning now. Where is the body? Hastings blinked. You believe he's still alive? Poirot raised a hand. I believe Lennox killed him. But he would not burn the body. Not yet. Not until he had secured Vivian's trust. It would be too risky. Poirot stepped closer. And remember, it was not Lennox who stood in the garden the first night. That figure was tall, yes, but slimmer than Lennox. And the night Vivian disappeared? Her note was rushed, but clever. She left it in plain sight, knowing we'd find it. She wanted to be found. He paused. I believe someone else was helping Lennox. Someone inside. The house. Later that day, Poirot asked to speak with Cordelia Barry more privately. She received him in her modest parlor behind the kitchen, still pale but composed. I'm glad it's over, she said. Poor Vivian. She hasn't slept since it happened. The stress. Yes, Poirot said softly. You care for her deeply, don't you? Cordelia gave a nervous smile. She's like a daughter. I've known her since she was 6. Poirot leaned forward. Then you must tell me something very important. Where were you the night before last? Between 10 and midnight? Cordelia stiffened. In my room. You did not leave? No. Yet Henry saw you walking the landing at 10:30. She hesitated. I was checking on Vivian. She'd had a nightmare. Poirot's voice grew gentle. But Vivian said she was asleep. And more importantly, she was not. In her bed at that time, was she? Silence. Poirot continued. You let her out through the garden door. You gave her the note, pretending it had come from Simon Vale. You convinced her to go. Cordelia's lip trembled. I didn't know. What he planned, I swear it. Lennox said he wanted to speak with her. Just talk, make peace. But you forged the second letter, Poirot said, the one warning her against trusting me. Tears welled in her eyes. He said she was being controlled by you, that he loved her, that she would thank me. Poirot's gaze was grave. Now, you have known Vivian for nearly 2 decades. You were more than a housekeeper. You were a guardian, a mother figure, and perhaps a gatekeeper to her fortune. Cordelia flinched. I never wanted her money. Never. No, Poirot said gently. But Lennox did, and you loved him. There was no denial. Only silence, thick and suffocating. Poirot met Hastings in the garden as dusk fell. She has confessed, he said simply. She loved Lennox. They were once engaged, years ago, when she worked in London. He found her again through this house. He charmed her, played the victim, convinced her that Vivian owed him something. She meant no harm, Hastings said quietly. Poirot nodded. No, but love is a powerful illusion. It blinds, it excuses. And so she became complicit, in lies, in letters, even in attempted murder. He turned to face the hedge, now thick with summer leaves. And what of Simon Vale? Hastings asked. Poirot's eyes darkened. I fear he lies buried in the woods behind Greystone. We shall find him, eventually. 2 weeks later, Vivian Hartley stood in the drawing-room with Poirot as he prepared to leave Braithwaite Lodge. For the last time. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. Poirot smiled. Then do not try. Merely live well, mademoiselle. She hesitated. I can't help thinking. It was all because of who I was, what I had, my inheritance. None, Poirot said gently. It was not what you had, but what others lacked. Conscience, restraint, clarity. She looked out the window toward the green curtains, now finally drawn back to let in the sun. I will never hang them again, she murmured. They always felt like eyes watching me. Poirot bowed, then let in the light. As the car rolled away from the lodge, Hastings looked back once more at the silhouette of the house. Do you think she'd be all right? Poirot adjusted his cuffs. Yes, she has seen what lies behind the curtain. And once a thing is seen, it cannot be unseen. He smiled faintly. And the play, mon ami? It is over. Hercule Poirot and the Girl Behind the Green Curtains, Chapter 10. The last letter, Poirot, did not return directly to Whitehaven Mansions. Instead, he made a quiet stop in London, alone, that the events at Braithwaite Lodge, though resolved, had left. A residue in his mind that no amount of symmetry could cleanse. He had spoken truth. He had named guilt. But still, something was missing. There remained one clue. One thread he had not yet pulled. One voice that had not yet been accounted for. It waited for him, in the form of a letter. The letter had arrived the morning, before Lennox's arrest, but had been set aside during the confusion. It had been placed innocently among other items in Poirot's coat pocket, possibly by Henry, possibly by someone else. Only now, in the quiet of a rented study above a tobacconist's in Bayswater, did Poirot unfold the parchment. It was unsigned. You see only the stage, Monsieur Poirot. You never look into the wings. You found the villain, yes. But did you find the author? Some stories are older than fire and deeper than curtains. The girl will inherit, the house will remain, and the world will believe the act is done. But the play has another act. Until the final cue. A watcher in the wings, Poirot, stared at the note for a long time. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Neat, symmetrical, but utterly impersonal. A style that gave away nothing. A mind that gave too much. Mon Dieu, he whispered. Another hand, in the shadows. That same afternoon, Poirot paid a visit to Scotland Yard. Inspector Mercer, now halfway through the Lennox file, raised an eyebrow at the detective's return. You again? Poirot handed him the letter. Mercer read it slowly. When he finished, he whistled. You think Lennox wasn't working alone? I think he was a pawn, Poirot said. A perfect one. Angry, intelligent, ruined, but directed. Fed carefully. Constructed truths. Manipulated into belief. Mercer frowned. But by whom? We've already arrested Cordelia Barrymore for complicity. Who else had reason? Poirot's voice dropped. There is only one person who gained everything without ever appearing guilty. That evening, Poirot returned to Braithwaite Lodge. Unannounced, Vivian was in the garden, reading by the fountain. She looked up, startled. I thought you'd gone, she said. Is something wrong? Not wrong, Poirot replied, approaching her, but unfinished. He took the seat beside her. Mademoiselle, he said gently, I must ask a terrible question. Her eyes flickered. Did you write the first letter? She laughed, but it came too quickly. Why would I?